today we're going to call interior therapy. We speak about the psychology of interior design, but what does that really mean for us as designers, and what can we learn from psychologists around how we can change our designs to be better equipped for the world that we live in today and for the people that we are designing for. So today we're going to speak to Eleftheria. Eleftheria is, she's someone that I hold in very, very high esteem. She's had quite a profound impact on my life and on my work as well. Eleftheria means freedom, and that's exactly what she stands for. Freedom of women's voices, finding their purpose, standing their sacred ground, and finding their place in the world. She stands rooted for other women to rise in their lives. She's been facilitating women's journeys through both her approach in psychology as a transformational facilitator and a spiritual teacher. She's been doing this for 20 years. I've been fortunate enough to... Hi, I see Eleftheria is already on. I've been fortunate enough to attend some of her workshops and her group sessions, both in a corporate setting as well as in an individual setting. And again, I'm gonna bring her in. Absolutely phenomenal woman, and she's going to speak to us today about women rising, their role in society, and psychology, and we'll look at how that impacts interior design. So I'm going to bring her in now for some interior therapy. Waiting for the connection. Just hold on.
Very good.
I have had such a technology morning. It was a thing that stressed me out. The minute I opened my computer, I was like, this can't happen now.
Hi.
Yeah. So welcome. I'm so excited to hear what you have to say today. So excited. I don't know if you heard the very, very brief introduction, which I don't think does any justice to what it is that you do. And I would just like to hear maybe a bit more about your background and why it is that you've chosen to come and speak today. What is it that you believe in that makes you want to be here today?
Thank you so much for the invite and the opportunity to speak here on Instagram Live, my first Instagram Live interview. So thank you very much. So for the last 20 years, I've been deeply privileged to work with women from all walks of life, from women in really, really impoverished communities to Fortune 500 companies. And my passion is really, liberating and freeing the sacred feminine within all of us. And so that really leads to looking at women and the sacred feminine presence that's within all women. And I believe that at this moment in time that we're standing at a global kind of moment, or the precipice of global alchemy in our world. And I truly believe that when women listen to that whisper, sometimes it's a lioness roar within them, there's a clarion call for women to really step up right now. And to just answer that call. You will know what it is. You'll know that the world and Mother Nature is calling you to step in and just rise to help make this world a more compassionate, a more braver, and a more beautiful world.
Thank you. I think that's one of the things that I've gotten from you that has influenced, my life and specifically my work is answering that call, like what can I do within my realm of adding value to the world? And it might not be climbing Mount Everest or saving the rainforests, but I can most certainly look at how I design and how that impacts the world, and just becoming unwavering in my choice of materials that I use, and sort of stipulating that I will only work with eco-friendly materials. That just minimizes the footprint, in the world. And if I stay committed to that, it means that my little sacred place is honoring my work, the people that I'm designing for, and the world, the environment. So just a bit off script, speaking about environment, you launched EcoCivilization last night, which was pretty amazing. I think what that really spoke to for me, though, is I often put out quotes, women are the architects of society. EcoCivilization, women standing for the environment, for what they believe in, finding their voices. And last night really just felt like that collection of people were doing exactly that. So can you just speak to women, community, eco-civilization, women as architects of our society?
Thank you. Yes. So I am really honoured to have been elected the country chair for South Africa for the eco-civilization movement. And it's curated by Violetta Bulch. And what I love about her as a feminine leader is that it's really an inclusive model. She is, inviting everyone to bring their gifts. Everybody. So the model is growing and in a very natural way. Organically, and so collectively we're co-creating, and so the most important word for us, I think, is really that co-creation of us all collectively co-creating a new world, because the world we knew is now gone. We really need to step in and create the world that I truly believe that we're all really longing for. If you really listen to your heart, there is a world of peace and prosperity for all, which we all really long for. And very often we, in a liminal time like we are in now, we can become quite hopeless. But I want everybody to really just know that there is already models, practices, alternative politics, different economic systems that are already on the ground and in place. And at the heart of all of this is a community of incredible women. I think the Dalai Lama in 1997 said it would be women who will change the world. And then I'd also encourage you to look at a fantastic documentary that was made by Amanda Foreman on the ascent of women.
Yeah.
She kind of impacts just the role of women in society, in politics and economics from, Mesopotamian times to now, and the rise and fall of women's rights in society. And so this is also, so important for us to learn from the past so that we can move into the future through a connection. And then just in terms of women's groups and community, the one thing that I've really experienced over the last 20 years is the absolute magic and deep healing and wonder that happens when women gather with a collective vision. It is just amazing. It still wows me. I still get those truth bump, amazing feelings, all the feels in my body when I have a group of women together who just, share knowledge, share space, and envision something together. It's amazing to see what actually happens.
I think that's one of the things that I also definitely stand for, and I think I may have gotten that from a few of your workshops, because I was quite resistant at first to be a part of women groups. The sharing of knowledge just seems to be so important to me that we're not going to expand in our own careers or in the way that we want to contribute to the world unless we're sharing knowledge. So what does it mean to me if I'm speaking about the psychology of interior design? Unless I'm actually tapping into that, I'm not the expert. How do I find that knowledge so that I'm able to apply it in my work and give it more depth, really? And I'm able to offer a much better service. And I think that's what I've really gotten out of the sharing of knowledge, is that we're expanding ourselves, we're expanding our service offering, we're expanding our reach, and therefore we can all do so much more and contribute so much more.
Absolutely, and I think this is the gift really of the sisterhood and working together in collaboration, which is all feminine leadership principles, is that very often, in our society, and in the feminine wound, in growing up in a patriarchal society, you kind of feel that you need to do things on your own. And there's also quite a deep feminine wound, and that's why a lot of women, are a little bit resistant to step into a community with women. And I think that's one of the biggest gifts that community offers you, is to really heal the wounds of the feminine. But once we step into that sisterhood and we step into collaboration, we can create and go so much further, because we're sharing all of these different aspects and learning from one another. Women for centuries have been gathering, in circles, creating, being very creative, knitting and cooking and, gathering food and, cultivating the land. Very often women are, the cultivators of food, and creating together. And it's in this space, where we are the heart of the community and the whole tribe, really. And so it's really time for us to step into that and start working together again as a community. And I think, again, women are really longing for that. There's like a deep call for us to step back into authentic relation to one another. And that then ripples out into, it starts in your home, but it ripples out into your community, and then it ripples out into global connection, and it affects everyone around you.
That's definitely something that I speak to, is the connection that we have with ourselves and our environment. And when we are connected to ourselves and our environment, we're able to give to communities and to our families. And I think that for me, and that's my personal experience, is so important. When I am connected to myself, I'm able to give more. So I think, can we also maybe just speak to how do we keep our cups full as women? Because exhaustion is how we all operate. Coffee and exhaustion. And it's actually a status symbol, really. How do we keep ourselves full so that we're able, sorry, there's my screen again, that we're actually able to give to our communities? How do we do that from a psychological perspective?
It's so incredibly important, right? We can only give what we have. And so, over the last kind of like 20 years, I often have women step into my office once they've hit burnout. Yeah. And so what you find also is that in a very productive, driven, we only value production world, women exhaust themselves because we haven't remembered that there's incredible value in being, and this is the feminine aspect of it, just the being part of it. And if we talk about our homes being the center point of that, there's this wonderful myth around the goddess Hestia and Hecate, who really were the homemakers. And so it is, understanding that the home is the sanctuary. This is a place we can restore. And at the moment, I think the most important thing for us is to step into resilience and really develop, that ability to adapt to change. We're so fearful of change. And that really starts in the home, right? And so our homes also have changed now. Now our homes are not just a place to restoring and being a massive part of like filling up your cup. Now our home hasn't just become the sanctuary it's supposed to be, but it's also become a school, it's become an office. It now has to, function as the full village, of access points. And so I think there, in terms of design, it's really looking at creating that environment which caters for all aspects, but really, really taps into a space for yourself to really be quiet, to restore, maybe set up a yoga practice, or meditation, the things that really fill you. It really fills up your cup.
I think that's definitely one of the things that I'm hearing as well from a design perspective. Just, our homes are now everything, as you said. But women are actually starting to ask those questions. I love reading. How do I put a reading nook into my office? I get joy when I'm cooking. Can we please redesign my kitchen? So now that we realize we're in our homes all the time, we're starting to tap into that. I love reading and I don't get the opportunity for that. How do I create that within my home? And I think the challenge for us as designers is how to design for those multifunctional spaces to cater. An office now needs to have a desk as well as a reading nook and a yoga mat. And it's really pushing the boundaries of, I almost think like we used to say, like, you've got to think outside the box. Where we're at now is there is no box. It's dissolving. So, yeah, it's, and I think that also means for me as a designer, really tapping into that feminine intuition when it comes to designing. And there's a lot of science behind design, but that always feels like there's a formula, there's science, and that feels like the masculine aspect. And I do great designs when I'm in that space, but I do phenomenal designs when I'm tapping into that intuition, that sort of universal creativity that is contained within the formula and the science to deliver it in a functional way. And it's hard. It's actually quite hard to be in that space where you're both functional and creative. And I think that's something that you focus on in feminine leadership very strongly, is how to navigate those two aspects within yourself and to flow between them. Can you speak to that?
Yes, absolutely. So the one thing, that women really almost like naturally can do, which is, again, there's some fantastic research, to back this up, is that a lot of men growing up in a patriarchal society only use the left brain because, again, that's something that's really rewarded, and that's almost like an overdeveloped left brain. Women naturally have this right brain, functioning, which is creativity and, intuition and that kind of thing, but we also have needed to use the left brain. So we're wanting to create a beautiful marriage between the masculine aspect and the feminine aspect. Masculine being active and feminine being passive. So it's giving and receiving and bringing into balance the left and the right brain, creativity and structure. So in terms of circling back to your previous question, how do we psychologically create a space in which we can refill our cups is, I think with all of these different functions that our homes now have, is boundaries. So not being, at work because your office is at home now, for those of you who've started working from home, but to set boundaries in terms of time, keep office times, and then flowing through that, you are in your sanctuary. So if there's a moment in your workday where you can, create a space where you just fill up, or have a walk in your garden, or make sure that you've got lots of plants in your office, so that you can tap into just a moment of restoring and tapping into what is true for me in this moment, or what is most important for me. And it's amazing to see how when women start shifting, or all of us actually really, when we start shifting our practice, our daily living into making space for really just being still quiet and receiving, often what people tell me is that they become more productive. So instead of doing, just taking some time for the feminine, even creativity, if it's something that if you do poetry or gardening or painting, if you take a break in your day and just allow yourself to be really creative in that expression, even if emotion comes up for you, to express it creatively, and then going back to the task at hand, you somehow seem to complete that task in a much clearer way.
Yeah. I think that's something that I can definitely relate on a personal level when it comes to just, plants and self-care during the day. I think for me, my self-care practice has had to change radically over the last couple of years, and more specifically the last year, self-care, I could put a block of time out before to meditate for 30 minutes between 4 and 5. Whereas now I'm needing those little fill-ups at 10, at 12, again at 2, and just, even if it's in my office, just for 5 minutes, being able to top up right now, because I don't have another hour left in me. And I think plants that you mentioned now, plants in your home, and we'll touch on this as well, that connection to nature is now becoming like, this is not up for debate. You need it. We're dying without it. And just self-care, I think for me that adds to self-care. Just the simple rule within your home is 10 meters from anything that represents nature. A pot plant, something that smells like nature, something that sounds like nature. 10 meters. That's your rule. You have to be within 10 meters of nature. And for me, that means in my office, having pot plants around me. Having a little incense stick that sort of smells like, I think mine's called cucumber and calm. But, having those things in place. And they're very small modifications that you can make. They're inexpensive and actually have really, really big effects on how we function. So if we can again just come back to what you touched on earlier on, which is resilience. And I think that also I feel less resilient than I did maybe 6 months ago. We're faced with so much more. What does resilience mean? Right. From a psychological point of view, what does it mean?
Yeah. So there are many different definitions of resilience out there, and I think at the start of this pandemic or global transition that we're going through at the moment, I really kind of asked, how can I serve? And I just saw a lot of women in my community really, really struggling with this change and dealing with facing, this incredible challenge that we're sitting with at the moment. And I then really developed this online course called Sacred Feminine Resilience, because again, what I was really seeing, in the world and a lot of teachings is a very masculine way of looking at resilience, which is like words, even like push through, toughen up, mental hardiness, all of these words, which really, for me personally, so there is a different way of stepping into resilience with Sacred Feminine Resilience, which is a softer way of really adapting and flowing and stepping into surrender. So in a nutshell, the definition of resilience is really the capacity and ability to adapt to change. So in our kind of society, in our very quick, society that we have, we've almost weakened our capacity for resilience, and we all have it. It's just really stepping back into understanding that there's a tool set that you can develop in terms of building that muscle of resilience. And again, we can look at nature. Nature is incredibly resilient and adapting to change. If you look at what's happening with like climate change at the moment, nature is just incredible at adapting, to shifting. Okay, things are shifting, and so I'm going to, tap into. If you think about a forest, again, it's tapping into a collective. So the forest roots would all be connected. They communicate with one another. They share resources. They share any nutrients that is needed from the mother tree, would send it out to the rest of the forest so that the whole forest can thrive. And so there's many different aspects to resilience. One is connection. It's so incredibly important. And then we also really look at, resilience robbers. What is in our environment or in our habits that actually stops us or prevents us from being truly resilient. And one of those, really looking at our environment, is, any stresses. So at the moment, our immune system is incredibly important. And so we want to be doing everything to really enhance that immune system so that it can adapt to all the changes that we're going through. And there's lots of research to also show us that if your environment is in a bit of chaos, which, when your house becomes everything, it's so easy for things to, become chaotic. That really affects your mindset, and it will trigger all of the perfectionist archetypes, which, when we speak about women, there's a huge perfectionist archetype there, and that in itself is a resilience robber.
I think I can definitely relate to that. Like, the less resilient I feel, the more chaotic the world is out there. My home takes the brunt of my perfectionism. And it's really just, I feel out of control, I'm in fear, and I need to recalibrate. So perfectionism steps in, and I've got to clean. I have to clean. I have to declutter. And that adds to my exhaustion, actually. It really does.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And then I think, also another really old practice, but again, psychologically this really affects us, is space clearing, right? I mean, we're having more people in our home, and it's just a really, really old sacred feminine practice, is to really work with the energy in your home, and again, this is completely individual, and up to you. Some people really like to use frankincense, other people like to use sound, other people like, to use incense sticks, or, smudging sticks. There's many different ways of just really, I think the most important thing is really your intention, is to walk through your home with an intention of clearing any energy that feels like, you can tell the vibe, even if you're not really energy sensitive, you can tell the vibe's not great. And so is that, a combination between, shifting things around, bringing color in, or is it opening up your heart space and setting an intention for the space, going, this is my restorative space, because I want to be resilient. I want to step into that resilience. And so I'm creating a space of peace and care and love. And in this space, in the kitchen, maybe, this is a space of nurture. And how can I nurture not just my body, but my family and my spirit? We're body, mind, and spirit. And so we've really got to look at, creating resilience for all of that, all of ourselves, so that we can rise and step up in this time.
I think what you've also just spoken to, though, is a really practical and easy way that we can utilize, as you said, tools. And I think it's also a self-care practice, really, on just making small shifts within our homes. And I can speak, we speak about eyes are the windows to the soul, but it's like your windows are almost like the eyes, the soul to your home, the looking in and the looking out of. And I remember with our first lockdown, that was the first thing I did, was I cleaned my windows. Just, it gave me clarity. I can see the world, and the world can still see me. And it's such a small thing, just having clean windows, opening up your windows every morning, letting light in. That affects our biorhythms. Letting fresh air flow through your home it's great. It lets that stale air out, stale energy, and it's simple. It's not a complicated practice to implement. And when you were speaking about creating that feeling of calm, using a diffuser with different, essential oils. In my office, I look at productivity, and I have an oil blend for that. In my bedroom, it's lavender. I need calm. And again, just using your environment in really small ways to just support you in what you're needing from that space. So I think that also answers the question I get asked, is it expensive to implement, self-care in your design? And I'm like, no. changing, using certain colors. You mentioned pillows, colors, just adding pops of colors can just add and uplift your mood. So it's just being resourceful within our spaces, I think, feels key. Something else? Yeah? No, carry on?
I think you just really highlighted a little piece of gold of sacred feminine wisdom as well, is that working with sacred feminine leadership or the principles is a very subtle thing, and it intuitively almost comes to you, like for example, using your essential oils, again, here we have, the archetype, the goddess archetype of the home, is bringing flowers in or scents or using the senses. And it's something very subtle, but it's something that really powerfully shifts everything in your environment, how you feel, how you relate, and how you interact in your environment. Our environment really affects us hugely. So our outside world is reflected by our inner world. And so if you want to know what's really happening in the emotional body or the mental body, just look around you, because that's what you're going to be creating around you. And then again, from the outside world, you can reshift the inner world. It's kind of like a yin-yang relationship.
Okay. Yeah, for me, like also listening to the stories, and you're speaking about the environment and this yin-yang, I think about things so quickly that I often don't notice the thoughts when I'm in my environment. I really have to slow down. You mentioned flowers. Again, where everything seems to just always come back to nature in some small way. But I shared something, I posted a comment, St. Joseph's lilies are my favorite, and I love them specifically because that smell really just moves through your home. And I caught myself after I made that comment on someone's Facebook post. I came home from work, you're exhausted, you've been dealing and multitasking all day, and you open up your front door and you smell socks, shoes, dustbin, and it's not actually about the smell. It's the story in my head that I attach to that smell. Because I walk in, I've had a long day. I don't go, oh my God, I'm so happy to be home. I go, an hour of laundry, now I've got to take out the trash. I'm already exhausted. And I actually go into drama. So again, just that small thing of being greeted as I open my door just by the smell of flowers takes out that internal conflict, drama, and resentment. I've been at work all day, and I come home and my family's destroyed my home, and now I've got more work to do. And it's just such a small thing that saves me an hour of resenting everyone around me and holding them hostage. Holding them hostage. So something else that I picked up on what you said, coming to authenticity, it's a buzzword. I talk about it. Design for authentic living. Break it down. What is authenticity? We're all talking about it. Do we know what it means?
Yes, I think there's a huge thing in terms of a lot of people feeling like there's a burnout on the word authenticity. Mm-hmm. And I think, every marketing person has picked up on, authentic chips, authentic this, authentic, However, I think we need to push through that burnout, because the word authentic and the expression of authenticity is incredibly important right now. And in the essence, what it really just means is the truth of who you are. So it's almost ironic that right now we're living in a world with masks, where we're wearing masks, and authenticity really is about taking the mask off and building relationships with people, with nature, with your family, with everybody around you, in a way which is truly authentic, which means that you can say what you mean what you say, and build trust. And so if we want to talk about authenticity, we can't talk about authenticity without need to be authentic, it means you need to be vulnerable, and that's a very, very scary place for us. And specifically in terms of what we've really been conditioned around vulnerability. I know in my Greek lineage, we were really taught from young that vulnerability is a weakness.
Yeah.
And only, as I started doing a lot of personal development, did I realize that vulnerability is really a strength, because we cannot connect and truly connect with one another if we're not vulnerable and we don't express ourselves authentically. And the other thing I often just teach and say is, and this is where the resilience comes in, we cannot be authentic without disappointing someone. And so it's learning to be okay with disappointing some people, because you're choosing to be true to yourself. So that's where the resilience muscle comes in, is to learn to stand for yourself, what's most important for you, because in the long term, people will respect you more, you will respect yourself, because you're really saying yes when you mean yes, and you're saying no when you mean no. So often just a little example of being inauthentic is people pleasing, right? And so this is another archetype which women really struggle with, is people pleasing. And so your friend asks you something and you go, yeah, sure, I'll do it. Because you've got some story about if I'm not helping her, or I'm not doing this, she's not going to love me anymore, or it's going to compromise the friendship. But while you're doing it, you're building resentment because you don't really want to do it. And so that moment of discomfort when you say to your friend, I'm really sorry, but I'm not going to do this, you're saving yourselves both resentment, and you're really building true connection.
And so would you also say, leading back or going back to a previous topic on community, building that community with like-minded people would support you? Because that's relearning a new way of being, essentially. I experienced that after doing your boundaries course, that it's hard to say no. You're changing the dynamics of friendships, and for me that also led into work. Actually, you're saying no to certain suppliers, you're standing for certain materials. It's hard to make that shift, because there's always that fear of, am I going to lose a client? Am I going to lose a friend? Would your community then support you through that crisis?
Yes, absolutely. And so that's the risk, right? Vulnerability always takes risk. And so it's to really look at all the false beliefs around that, So we believe that if we say no, that we're going to lose out, but we don't look at, the fact that we're actually gaining. So when you're saying no, to one thing, you're saying yes to something else, which means you're actually saying yes to, I have more energy. What the choice that I'm making is really in alignment with my values and how I really want to serve. And then, it's almost like magic, where the more clearer you become about who you are and what you stand for, that community just kind of starts arriving. It's like attracts like. And so you'll find a community that just supports you because they believe in the same things that you believe in. It's that collective value system that we have that's the center point, almost the fire of the circle.
Okay, I remember you telling me this, but there again, there's that period when you make that decision of standing for your values, where you do feel alone, and then your tribe arrives, and having at least one person within your circle to support you through that, because it is, I think the universe is testing you almost. Are you really, maybe the words are resilient, brave enough to follow through on what you've just chosen to stand for? There's that testing period, and you doubt yourself, and then all of a sudden it flows from there. And again, I think I like your term, like attracts like. It feels softer than your vibe attracts your tribe. which again feels like marketing speak. But when you use the words, and I think that's the power of words that we use with ourselves, that like-minded people would collaborate together, just is what feels good for me. It feels good for me to think about it that way.
And I think you're very right. It takes immense courage to stand for what you believe in. And there will be a moment when you have to stand by yourself. But that moment is really a threshold guardian, as you say. To really say, okay, are you sure this is really what you want to stand for? And I think when you say yes to that, that is when everything starts shifting, in your life. But there's a part of us, I think the most, it's an obvious question, but over the last 20 years working with women, this has probably been the biggest catalytic question, is asking people, what do you want? Because that's the only question that life is continuously asking from you. What do you want? And it's such a scary question, but at the same time, if you can't answer it very clearly, you will establish relationships and collaborations which are just not in alignment with you. And it'll give you the opportunity to work all of that out, but it may create some conflict, it may create a little bit of hurt and some pain, but we really need to get very, very clear, specifically at this time, in terms of what it is that you want. And again, that's something I think that women haven't given themselves permission for. Is like, what is your secret desire? What would you really love? And then giving yourself permission to receive that. Again, here we have the feminine principle about receptivity, receiving that. And once you're very clear on what it is that you want, what you stand for, because if we don't know what we stand for, we will fall for anything.
I love that. Yeah. Wow.
So it's really, and this is what the Root to Rise kind of movement's really about, rooting in the truth of who you are, what you stand for, what your values are, and then rising from there. Then it's really clear. If you think about anybody that you really admire, they would be probably an authentic person. And authentic people have very, very clear boundaries. Some of the most compassionate people in the world have very clear boundaries because you know exactly where you stand with them. You know what's okay with them and what's not okay with them. So there's no space for there's no space for misunderstandings or confusion, or if you step into a conflict, it's so easily resolved because it's very clear about what's okay with you and what's not okay with you. And there's deep compassion in that.
Compassion, I think, is something that feels almost like a golden thread, though, in everything that we've spoken about today. Authenticity requires compassion. Self-care is compassion with yourself. And I know I'm also able to give more compassion once I've learned how to give it to myself. But you also said something very interesting now, giving yourself permission to receive. I mean, we've touched on that, like write yourself a permission slip. And something, you can also speak to this, but something that I come up against a lot with women and designing their homes is that they're so geared to the focus outward that they don't give themselves permission to have what it is that they want. So instead of designing that beautiful kitchen that brings them joy, they feel obligated to spend that on their business, their family, their children. So maybe here you could speak to our natural state. What is that? And how does that allow us to give more to our families, our communities?
Yes, it's incredibly important for women right now to really just reclaim the truth of who they are, right? And so that's reclaiming your voice, reclaiming your gifts, reclaiming your passion, reclaiming your clarion call for why you are here in this moment at this time. And so when we can give ourselves permission to really reclaim the true essence of who we is when we tap into our natural state. And so I believe truly that we've disconnected from nature in so many different ways. In fact, the other day I listened to a powerful interview, and the interviewer was saying that even in our Oxford Dictionary, the definition of nature is all of life excluding human beings, right? And so even in our dictionary, we are defining nature as something outside of ourselves, that human beings are separate from it. And I think that is our deepest wound and the biggest lie and the biggest illusion we've been taught. Yes. So the second we can reconnect with nature and understand that our environment, the planet we live on, we are inextricably interconnected to all of life itself. All of life breathes together. When we make that connection with nature, I believe that what happens is we start awakening our true nature. And our natural state is a state of grace and connection. And this is where we'll find our authentic voice, our authentic expression, and who we truly are. And again, all of this information is available to you, and it's in the heart. It's in the heart center. And so if we can set up some kind of practice where we step into, I've developed this meditation called Heartfulness, because mindfulness, although as a practice I really understand the term, the word doesn't make any sense because we don't want our minds to be full, but we want our hearts to be full. And so heartfulness is really being rooted in the truth of who you are, interconnected inextricably to all of life itself, and then connected to a power greater than ourselves, which is love. Because at the end of the day, love is the answer. It's the answer to everything.
I mean, I love the debate. Your choices are simple. It's love or fear, and love is always the answer. But I think what I'm sitting with right now is like mind blown. Heartfulness versus mindfulness. I've done a course on mindfulness, and it has really served me well. But I'm now exploring that, coming into that heart center, and that our hearts have actually got brain, neuron, and that when we receive information, it's like literally all the neurons that we have in our brains are actually in our heart. So we receive through our heart first, and then it goes from those brain neurons.
We've had to come outside. Speaking about resilience, internet issues and resilience often clash. Often clash. So, where did we end off? I had to quickly grab and run.
We were talking about the heart, which is so important. You know, the Heart Math Institute has also really shown us that the electromagnetic field of the heart is 5,000 times stronger than the brain. And so I think that there's also so many things that that's still a mystery to us. There's so many things that we're still discovering, learning, and this is quite exciting actually, that we're only really starting to discover the incredible value of the heart.
I think going back again to something that you said, that we're at this like precipice of change, and I think we're seeing it in absolutely every area, whether it's mindfulness now shifting into heartfulness. EcoCivilization for me was just yesterday really spoke to that connection with nature, and my observation was it was full of women. The speakers were women, the listeners were women, so that really just feels like evidence around how women are going to alchemize the change that needs to happen, and then looking at how we support women now. And I think that's a lot of what we've been speaking about. How does the environment support women? How do we shifting our meditation practices, self-care? It's all about supporting women who are going to alchemize the change that the world needs to see. And I think it's going to become a very broad topic, and tapping into multiple fields I think is also going to become important. I don't think we have the luxury being arrogant, like I'm a designer and I know how to do this, without tapping into, psychology, meditation. How can I design a meditative space for my clients if I haven't actually participated in meditation spaces myself? And that means we're all going to expand within ourselves and within our careers, which is amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's such an important point you just made, is that it's so connection, not just with nature, but with all different fields, is just so incredibly important, because otherwise you're sitting with half the story. So I know specifically for working with my clients as well, is I love it when my clients are working with other therapists or body workers, or they're working with different aspects of themselves, but it contributes so much to your own well-being and thriving as an individual, but then also, again, expanding that out to your community, your family, and that ripples out into the world. But if we bring different fields of science and nature and spirituality together, that's when we're really working with a holistic approach to everything, which I think is really important, and I really hope that this is our way forward, is a holistic approach to everything that we do.
That's something that we have in design, is we're speaking about holistic design, wellness focused design, biomimicry, but it's really looking at and I think that's something that you've always sort of emphasized. What is your why? What does it mean to you? Is really delving deep into what does holistic design mean to me, and then exploring that deeply, and then finding the people that I'm aligned with that can guide me through different areas that I'm just not as well equipped to navigate on my own.
Yes. I think again, it's healing that feminine wound of a deep-seated belief, maybe because we have some wounding in trust, that we believe that every woman is an island, and how we can actually thrive when we heal that wound and we start collaborating as a sisterhood, right? Because it's just so much more fun doing things in a collective way, right? I mean, you can share the joy, you can share the frustration, you can share the challenges, you can cry together, you can laugh together. It's just so much more fun.
And isn't that maybe also just part of what we were talking earlier on, like our natural state, like fun? Like as you said that word, I felt shivered, like I'm missing that in my life right now, and that it's our natural states are fun, playful, joyful, and we need to bring that into our lives, our homes, our work, our communities.
I think joy is incredibly important. Again, a very important part of resilience is allowing and giving yourself permission for joy. Again, joy is one of the most vulnerable emotions we can experience, and so therefore we almost forego it because it's such a great feeling, and so we don't want it to be taken away from us. And so it's safer to not allow yourself to feel it. But joy, I think, is so incredibly important, specifically during times of grief. Very often when we're grieving, a lot of the world, besides just losing really loved ones and beloveds right now, and also losing species, and there's a lot of death and rebirth that is happening at the moment. And when we're going, and I also believe that globally we're going through a grieving process, grieving your previous life, the way things used to be, the way we used to engage with each other. There's a lot of grief happening at the moment. When we're going through grief, often we feel guilty when we feel joy. But part of the grieving, to really honor the grieving process, is allowing yourself to have those moments of joy.
Yeah, I was wondering when you said the foreboding joy, it's like, why would we prevent ourselves from wanting to be happy and joyful? And I think you answered that for me. It's guilt. if I'm happy, I'm guilty that you're not.
Yes.
But is it not maybe that my happiness almost honors your mourning? The opposite. That there's an honoring in it.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I think our themes were today authenticity, and then there were a lot of C's that came up: compassion, collective, community. Sorry, that was just someone at my gate shouting for me. Resilience, and how to design our lives and our worlds, our environments to support us in resilience. Self-care, connection, C again, connection to nature. Each of those, I think, could be expanded on a topic on their own, but we'll leave it there for today, I think. One last thing, where do we find this course on resilience?
Right.
Where do I find it? I found the boundary one a few years ago. Where do I find resilience?
So it's at eleftheria.center, and you can look under services. There will be a tab underneath there that says Sacred Feminine Resilience. And it's an online course. It's self-paced, so you go through it by yourself, but we also do live group calls, which is so important again. So groups that do it together, there's a connection. There's some people make lifelong friends, going through the journey together.
Yeah.
And all the tools that you will need for building resilience and tapping into sacred feminine resilience is in there. Specifically, my last group, the module they really loved the most was emotional agility, and that's all about tapping into heartfulness.
Heartfulness. I think that's also my new word, heartfulness. Heartfulness. I think I love the first thing that you said when it was an online course. I was like, oh my God, I've done so many of these. How do I stay accountable? And you answered that there is a group. So I am back in connection. I'm in community, and I'm held accountable to my own choice to grow. That's my own choice to grow. I'm held accountable to that. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm also just going to post that in the comments below, Elle. So that's very easy for people to find. Just a link so that it just keeps it simple. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time today, and for giving us the insights in a very soft, as you always do, soft, beautiful, connected, compassionate way. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
And wishing you and everybody that's listening a beautiful day.
Awesome. Thank you, Elle, so much. So much. Always something that comes out of it. Have a beautiful day.